how did I not play the right intro? I mean, it wouldn't be carnage on carnage. Anyway, brilliant start. Thank you very much for joining me.
It was a good intro.
People,
I thought it was nice.
Fantastic intro. It's just for a different show.
It's a long old countdown.
And the countdown was on purpose. It's like sort of the tense, the build up and everything. But then I fucked it up by playing the wrong intro. But it is what it is. Carnage by name, carnage by nature. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. As you can see, I have a couple of mates, stalwart, icons, heroes on the panel.
Where is the heroism?
Oh my God.
I want to be included in that list at some point, please.
I'm happy with mates. All take mates. I'm not taking. If there's acts of heroism to be done, I nominate Pajak. He can do
I can't do the heroism.
He'll cartwheel into it as well.
Cartwheel into the heroism. That's what he'll do.
First and foremost, did you guys like the thumbnail, the pictures of you guys? I've actually made you guys look fucking amazing.
You've made us look 10 years younger, Grizz. Each and every one of us. I had hair in that thumbnail, mate. I was literally half the man that I am now.
You're still getting strong. You're still getting strong. You don't need a salad job yet. No, you're all right. You're all right.
I'd love a Salah job, by the way. I reckon Salah's got like the best one in the business. Like he's not gone to some fucking mug, has he? He's the full hair effort.
Oh, sorry.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I'd honestly, I was looking at it when he was getting interviewed on TNT when they gave him man of the match solely so they could interview him after the game. And I was looking at it just like, oh my God, the money he's paid for that. I'm saying he's dropped.
But come on, it's
on that bad boy.
Do you think it's working? Do you think it's worked?
I think it's going to look phenomenal in about 6 months. I think he's going to march brilliantly. I like it short at the minute. I think it suits him, and I think he should try and keep it there until he's ready to go bang. But I think when he goes bang, it's going to look top notch.
Okay.
I assume this is why you invited us all on for fashion tips for football players.
Listen, everything goes. Everything goes.
Sure.
What a lineup! People are showering you with some amazing, lovely comments. And then there's the odd dickheads. But hey, mods, do your thing. We know all opinions are allowed. No. Before we go on, I must say this: all opinions are allowed. All opinions except abuse. So anyone
it's just jealousy. It's jealousy. Look, just because the club pay me to say what they want doesn't mean that you should be able to criticize me. All right, guys.
That's what it is. That's exactly what it is. Exactly what it is. People, thank you very much for joining us. Wow, close to 400 of you in here already. Amazing. Smash the like button if you haven't. Subscribe if you haven't. I was gonna, as I told you guys before off air, I was gonna do an agenda and do all structured chat and all that kind of business. And then I said, "Who the fuck am I kidding? We're just gonna talk football. We're gonna talk Liverpool. I've got a cup of tea, a mocha actually. I've gone up in the world since my trip to America. Mocha is in place, and we're going to chat Liverpool, We're going to chat Slot. We're going to chat the ending of Klopp. In fact, I want to go to Lawrence first because Lawrence has kindly made time for me. First time on my channel, and I'm going to come to you because we all done tributes to Klopp, and I've seen Neil's amazing tributes, and he's even done a book which he's going to plug. And Chris done some great content over but I'm going to come to you, Lawrence, for the personal reason, because I saw your tribute to him, and I thought it was one of the most emotional tributes I saw. So we're not going to dwell on Klopp too much, but just for you, what did Klopp mean to you? And when it ended, how did you feel?
Probably, obviously, I've seen everything that Neil and Chris have said, so it's difficult to add to that. But for me, obviously, previously, I'm 35. I hadn't had many managers in my lifetime that had defined an era in my life. Maybe Rafa Benitez came the closest to doing that. And then the thing that Klopp did was not only reinvigorate my sense of Liverpool fandom, but also, I had 2 kids during that time. I think a lot of people understand the love that a father wants to pass on to his son or daughter. But then also, it really struck me, to be frank, my dad had cancer in that time. And I was really worried that we wouldn't see a Liverpool League title together. And Klopp gave me that. And that was the biggest part of it. So obviously, there's a lot of memes of me crying online. It's lovely for Manchester United fans to make fun of that. But the main reason I was crying was not so much the Klopp was gone. It was more that I was like, oh, thank God he didn't pass away before I got those special memories. Does that make sense? Absolutely. And obviously, I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, I think one of the missed things about that, all of that really now is, and because you got a bit more distance from it, it's easier to do. Is that I don't think, I think in loads of ways Klopp was a genius, but one of the things was that we were all here and around before then, and we were waiting for the thing that was going to catalyse us all in a number of different ways. Chris was doing Redmen before then. Lawrence has been doing work before then as well. The Anfield rap was going, Spirits of Shankly, Boss, everything, and also literally people as individuals as well. The supporters clubs all over the globe. Everyone was waiting for the thing to get behind, and that's quite a Liverpool thing, really. You need the thing could have been anything. The thing could have been negative. The thing could have been positive. We just got that thing. And while we got that thing, we made friends, we lived lives, we fell in love, we danced, we had children, we lost family members, but all of it wasn't solely linked by literally the idea of Jurgen Klopp, but instead it was just sort of, but he does become at the centre of lots of those things in a way which he himself would understand, but would also say, well, I didn't matter, guys. You mattered. I didn't matter. You mattered. And I think that's one of your sort of the core parts of this, really, because he was such an emotional leader in so many different ways. Therefore, what happened was people's emotions went through him. And I think it's a bit different now. And that's not to say that people can't have emotional feelings about Slot or this new side. I very much hope they end up having emotional feelings about this new side. But there are different ways to go about this. And I think it is sort of the end of something. It's the end of a chapter in many of our lives, especially those of us who are fortunate enough to have Liverpool so much at the centre of what we do. But I would argue that that's almost most of the fan base, and was for much of the period of time that Klopp was manager. And, supporters club numbers have gone up all over the world. The number of people who go and watch Liverpool in the United States is up massively. And we just got to see that when we went over for the pre-season tour. The number of people who make a pilgrimage to Anfield once or twice a season, that's increased. There's more hotels in the city centre. People are desperate for parades. All of that it's part of the legacy of Klopp, but it's also part of the unifying legacy of people loving each other. And I think that, we can keep that bit, by the way. Arne Slot doesn't need to worry about that bit. We'll do that bit. The four of us, everyone in the chat, everyone around the world, when we go and do pre-season, we'll do that bit. He can just crack on and coach the best possible football team. But Klopp reminded us of all of that, but also, showed us a way. But we still did, and I was made up when he said this at the end. I thought it really clarified things on, what he said, the doubters to believers things. You had to make the change. I could just help, but it's still your active change. It's not mine. And I think that's just really insightful. But I just genuinely agree with it. We were here. We were waiting for him. He then happened. We were then us. Klopp's not at Shevchenko Park. He's got a football match to prepare for. He's not at Shevchenko Park making it Boss. We're at Shevchenko Park because he made it Boss, but he's not at Shevchenko Park making it Boss. And I think remembering all of that's the most important thing. And remembering that he was at the centre of that's the most important thing.
Someone said to me the other day, I was having a debate about, someone said, oh, he only won one title or whatever. And I just turned to them and said, I just don't think you get it. Like, I just don't think you'll, not in a patronizing way, but in a just sort of like, he did what we needed him to do. And what was even better about it was the guy he kind of tried to throw the parade of the two cups in my face. And I turned to him and I just went, that shows you really don't get it. If you think that doing that, and he went, yeah, but you could have had a quad. And I went, the fact that we have a manager that means that didn't matter. Obviously it matters, but it didn't matter to us. And we would still do that. Meant so much more, and that was how important I think it felt, because he allows me to dunk on anyone that I debate, and that's what I ultimately live for.
I think that one of the things for me is, I'm 41 years old. We're all of a similar age, aren't we?
You look great.
Give or take 10, 12 years, depending on if I die my beard.
You are not 53. That is incredible, Chris.
I'm just putting it out there. Depends if I dye my beard that week. Anyway, sorry, Chris.
Fair play.
So I think the thing for me is, like, I remember what my dad used to talk about when I was growing up, when I was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And we'd be watching football, and we'd be watching, whether Graham Souness's sides or Roy Evans' sides or whatever. And he'd be telling me about this frigging team from the 70s and the 80s. And he would bore the shit out of me, but I'd be there lapping it up like, Dad, are we really going to do this again, Dad? You know what I mean? I know all about it. I know all about these fellas. I know about Dalglish and Rush and all that type of stuff. I've now got that. That's something I've waited 30 years to be able to do. So I will be boring people in 30 years' time, anyone who will listen, about Bobby Firmino, Sadio Mane and Mo Salah, because that's what my dad's still doing about those teams in the 70s and 80s. And I've got my own now. We were all brought up on these stories. We were dying to live those stories ourselves. And that's what Jurgen Klopp did with us.
And also reminds us that there's better ones to come. So, for instance, there's not going to be a better night at Anfield than San Etienne. Or Inter Milan. There was not going to be a better night at Anfield than Inter Milan. Then there wasn't going to be a better night at Anfield than San Etienne. Then there wasn't going to be a better night at Anfield than I'd say Barcelona in the treble season. Then there wasn't going to be a better night at Anfield than Juventus. Then the next time there was a European night at Anfield, there was Chelsea, and you can sort of spool that along. There were a few better nights than Dortmund. You keep going. Manchester City, you're not going to get a better night than that ever in the whole of your life. Oh, hang on, we're going to be 5-0 up against Roma on 70 minutes. You're not going to get a better night, European night than that at Anfield. And then you'd end up with Barcelona in there as well. And for me, the most important thing is to say, well, that might not be the best one. Like, we could have better nights in our lives, because if you were 73, you've just had all them. You could have been at all of them, or watched all of them, or been part of all of them. And I think that that's the big thing to remember, is that nothing's finished. And dwelling, and I don't want to dwell on we're talking about them now, but the most important thing to say is don't dwell on this. Live in the moments, because that's the thing he reminded of. He said, forget all that. I will sort that out. We'll be better than that. Forget all that. We're going to keep going. And we're going to not just do that, but we're going to take what that was and we're going to take it to another level. We might not have hit the peak. And I don't mean that in a sort of disrespectful way. The most important thing is to live in the moments, to get part of this now, and to share it as much as humanly possible, and to enjoy it with one another.
But this is exactly the response I knew we'd get. I only wanted Lawrence's assessment of Klopp. I didn't even ask Neil or Chris, but they gave the input. I'll tell you why. Because that's the effect Klopp had on the individuals, named individuals. Neil couldn't help himself. Chris couldn't help himself. They wanted to weigh in on the Klopp, and that's what he does. I knew how felt Chris. I wanted to get Lawrence's perspective on it, and Lawrence put it brilliantly, in terms of everything that he went through. And that video, if you haven't checked it out, Lawrence, which channel is it on? Is it on your?
I just think it's on Lawrence McKenna. I've made a separate Liverpool channel now, but
go and check them out. Check it out.
But yeah,
that video is iconic, and that's why I wanted to refer to it. But that's what Klopp does, because all the rest of us weighed in. Even though I said we're only gonna have a few minutes on the Klopp, because we have Slot now, and I'm gonna come to you, Chris, because obviously his mantra from day one was doubters to believers, right? And that was iconic, and it stayed in our minds and everything else. And the fact that we did believe, we ended up believing. Is there an element of doubt again? And should there be an element of doubt again in the fan base with the new hierarchy? Not hierarchy.
I don't think there is, to be honest with you. And I might be completely wrong on this. I just don't think the trust is there. And I think that's different to doubting somebody. It can be interpreted maybe the same way, but I think people want to see what he's doing, and people want to hear him talk, and people want to hear him be his own man. And I think that's important as well. He's not come in and he's not following Jurgen Klopp. Like, listen, I didn't go over to America like a couple of years did and stuff, but we went hoping that we'd be able to get an interview with the manager if it was at all a possibility. But the manager, instead of placating Liverpool fans or Liverpool fan media, went, nah, lads, I'm here to win football games. That's how you're going to fall in love with me. You might fall in love with me over time with me straight talking and everything else, but I want Liverpool to be a serious football team, and that means going out and winning games. And the best possible thing I can do for that is to focus on coaching Liverpool and making Liverpool better. So I think after the weekend, I thought it was a brilliant managerial display, and there's not many brilliant managerial displays over the course of a year with a manager, but to put one down in your first game away from home, I thought was brilliant, and make that change at half time and set your stall out. And the way he's just dead he's just dead Dutch, isn't he? At the end of the day, he's just dead matter of fact, and he'll just tell you straight exactly how he's feeling. I think that will come. Listen, everybody liked Jurgen because of this personality that we saw and the Dortmund side that we all fell in love with. Slot doesn't have that to fall back on, so I think he's going to have to get a lot of trust from us. And, we'll be there in the ground, we'll be in the away games and all that type of stuff, and he's going to get that support, he's going to get that trust.
Case says, refreshing to see a group of Reds having a conversation and not just shouting about transfers. We will shout about transfers. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but we will. This is just the warm-up, so to speak. But Neil, what does he have to do, in your opinion, then, from a personal point of view? I mean, obviously, I'm not saying you're a doubter, but there's obviously, what's the word I'm looking for? Uncertainty when a new man comes in, especially with the background changes in the backroom staff. Sorry, and I don't think I think it's an unprecedented amount of changes that we've had in the backroom staff. Not only the assistant coach, the coach, all the coaches, so many people behind the scenes. It was a huge sporting director, football director. It's a huge change taking place at Liverpool Football Club, Neil.
It is, but in terms of what he has to do, it's the same thing as the previous manager. Just because the previous manager has a magnetic personality, he still has to win games of football.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that is the first. If you want to get a hearing on anything, as the previous manager did, we talk a lot about Klopp as though he turned up as a hugely charismatic individual. But for instance, one example, and people can agree or disagree, or even not like him doing it, but he doesn't talk, for instance, about the Brexit vote until 2018. Until he's getting into a Champions League final. That's when he's asked about it, but also when he responds about it, and when he becomes more of a sort of a public individual is from about 2018. He'd been Liverpool manager for 2.5 years by that point. The most important thing, the first thing any football manager needs to do is, if they want to get a hearing on any matter, is to win games of football. So we started with a win, and it was a good win, and it was a good performance and a good display, and what we've seen in pre-season looks good, and I think he's worthy of the benefit of all doubts right the way through. So what we've seen so far, if people have any, and I just don't think that people particularly do, his job's to come in and to coach this team and to get the best out of these players, and to me, he looks well equipped to do that. I've enjoyed the way in which he's spoken. I think he's not looked for any hiding places. The easiest thing in the world for the next fella in would have been to say transition, it might be a bit of a difficult season. Now, Arsenal, Manchester City, they're good, aren't they? He hasn't done that. He's acknowledged what we're up against, but he's said, well, we need to be in that fight. He's not looking for hiding places. His job is to come in and to win games of football for Liverpool, and then hopefully by extension win trophies. And it would be easy for him to talk about the transfers if you want to. We've not bought a player. It'd be easy for him to say, and so far we haven't had any new signings in. I've not been able to get to where I want to get to. You've got the Manchester United manager who's starting his third season crying his eyes out about the fact that he doesn't feel his team's ready. And the Liverpool manager, who, as I say, hasn't bought a player, saying, I like these players, I fancy this, we're going to try and win this league. Well, that's what I want to hear, but also I agree with him. I think that it's the only way you can go about your business, and that's what he's doing. He's setting the standards where they need to be. And I like the idea that he comes in and looks at last season, 82 points, quarterfinal in Europe, and says, all right, well, that's the base mark. That's we start there. That's, if we're doing better, that's par, and I want to do better than par. And I think that comes through everything he's doing. And I agree with him, by the way. I think that last season was par. I think that the previous manager does a really good job for 2/3 of last season in increasingly difficult circumstances. But I don't think he finishes the season doing his job particularly well. And I think there's a few reasons for that. And I don't think it's easy to do his job, I hasten to add. But if you were to ask me what I'd give Jurgen Klopp, 23-24, I'd give him probably a 7.5. If you'd ask me what I'd give him 22-23 and what he'd give himself 22-23, I don't think he'd give himself 5. I think he does his job brilliantly, 21-22. As far as I'm concerned, that is the benchmark. The base is break 80 points. Let's have a European run. And that's what the manager's made clear. He agrees with that. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm bang into that. I'm bang into his tone, his outlook. And I think we go from there. And I don't want any hiding places. I'm not interested in that. The job is to win. And winning may not result in ultimately winning any trophy. It's not the idea that it's the league or bust or the Champions League or bust. But for me, it is 80 points. And, if you're going to get 80 points, you've got to win 24 games, 25 games. And I think that's what he sees himself as being able to do as a bare minimum. And I think he can do better than that. And I think he thinks he can do better than that.
Lawrence, obviously, if we're going to get 80 points, obviously, we need to start racking up wins. And we've wrapped up our win after game week 1.
Yeah.
Just give me a brief overview of what you saw different, or was there much different? And do you think that was his aim to not make sudden changes in terms of tactics and asking players to do certain things? Because all the talk, and we're going to come to Chris's infamous or famous, I thought, question about tactics and Slot, but I didn't see.
It's a great moment.
I didn't see huge amounts of difference in the approach, but you may have, because you've got a keener eye than me.
I don't. But I think the main thing that I noticed was different is how can I put it? I mean, in a lot of my videos, I've been saying it doesn't feel as intense in the same way. It feels like the intensity has shifted, though there is still an intensity to Liverpool. There is still a confidence. There is still the control. We do still, there's still the effort that we love to see. And I think the effort was a real base mark for me. I definitely think a change for the players has been as good as a rest. And, I'm not going on any... I'm not going on any great insight from one source within the squad, but I definitely got the feeling that towards the end with Klopp there was an element of he knew that it was time for a change around the club, and that wasn't necessarily that he had to leave. There might have been changes that he could have implemented himself, but I think he kind of saw that there were elements within the team that if he was to try to transition away from them, it might not go as favourably as he would like it to. And I'm putting that as diplomatically as possible. I don't think that I'm not casting any aspersions. Anyway, it goes that then when he comes in and brings in these new tactics with him, and every player to an extent gets a fresh start, I think with that comes a new sense of, I can thrive in this position. We've seen Dominic Szoboszlai drastically change his role. McAllister, you could see drastically change his role. I thought it was weird how many people criticised Alexis McAllister on the weekend when it was quite clear that what his instructions were to do exactly what he was doing. Yeah, I think he could have made some more passes. Yeah, I think there were a couple of moments where he missed whatever it was, but his role had very clearly changed. And then, for some weird reason, people aren't speaking about, obviously everyone's praising Gravenberch, but they're not speaking about how the flaw of what people thought he was capable of and the ceiling of what he was capable of in the fans' minds has changed. And for some weird reason, we're just sort of going, we thought he'd always be good. And so that was the most notable change for me, rather than just, formation, which obviously we can all assess, or, look, bounce pass. Look, the ball's gone forward, then backwards, then back forward. Those are all great observations. But I think for me, it was the perception of the players has changed. And I wasn't at the game. I'll be at Anfield on the weekend, but I wasn't at this game. And I'd imagine that will change the way that we support the team. And I've heard Neil speak about this a lot. Like, we kind of relearned how to support under Klopp. And there's like a language that the fans have to learn from the manager as to what's good for us to encourage. What does the manager expect of the team? When the ball goes here, do we cheer? Or, do we worry when the ball goes wide? And, the fullbacks aren't where they're meant to be? Or tactically, is that actually okay? And we all just sort of go, actually, yeah, that's one of the things that tactically happens. I think that's something we've all got to relearn in a way.
I think that's a very
one of the things. Sorry, Grizz. One of the things there that Ipswich game, it was the second half was just so Klopp though as well, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah,
and I was worried when we were talking about bringing in a manager. If the football isn't what we need as fans to get behind the team, listen, Pep Guardiola, I think, is one of the best coaches of all time. But long before he came to England, I stopped watching his Barcelona side because I was fucking bored. Agreed. To be quite honest with you, and it was boring for me. It never had that verve to it the swashbuckling nature of a great Klopp side or anything else, you know what I mean? And yet for him to be able to sort of throw out the baby in the bathwater halfway through a game, in his first game in charge, when you're laying the foundations down, when you're laying the principles down and go, I got it wrong, it's fine, I'll just do this instead, it's fine, we can just play a little bit more direct. I'm like, this is brilliant, because now you're going to learn from us as much as what Lauren says is true, we're going to learn from him. All of a sudden, he might feel the energy in Anfield and be like, we need to play it quicker, because all of a sudden, this is how this crowd beats a team. You know what I mean? So there's learning on both sides of it.
No, and absolutely. And I'm going to stick with you, Chris, because obviously every man and his dog and his fridge and his microwave saw that press conference where you had the honor of asking Jurgen Klopp, Arne Slot, a question. And I thought you asked probably the best question of the press conference. But I think he owes you an apology, because I tell you why. Ever since he said what he said to you, correct me if I'm wrong, fellow Liverpool fans, he's quite literally played that formation that he said he doesn't play.
No, Chris isn't smart enough. Chris isn't smart enough to
Saturday was the one game when he didn't actually.
Yeah.
Go on.
Is that personal, do you think, Chris?
I think Saturday was the one game that he didn't play very much a 4-2-3-1.
No, he didn't put two in front of the back four in the build-up phase, and I think it's in part because I think McAllister's. I think Lawrence has been a little bit kind to McAllister earlier, and I think he's just poor and still getting up to speed. I thought he was. I thought he was poor against Sevilla, and I think he was for 60 minutes until the going was good. I thought he was just poor against Ipswich as well. I think a lot of things, and it's fine in that we know he's a really good player, and it's just going to take a little bit of. I think the manager's trying to use these games now to get him up to speed because he hasn't been able to use them in pre-season, and I think that it's worth saying the manager's job at the minute is obviously to win games of football, but it's also to make sure Liverpool are ready for the 14th of September. And everything that comes thereafter. It's not just the idea at the minute of winning those games of football. That is the most important thing. But there are other things at play that he's got to get his players, as much of that squad, as fit as possible. And I think he was using that one a little bit. It'll be interesting to see what happens when we get to Old Trafford.
Well, was you guys surprised though? But was you guys surprised he used a certain amount of players in the squad all the pre-season? So for the likes of Tsimikas, and I'm not talking about the youngsters because the youngsters were never going to start the first game of the season, but I'm talking about the squad stroke on the verge of the team players. For example, your Tsimikas, your Curtis Joneses, and who else was there? Harvey Elliott. And so the three of us, was you surprised, guys, that he went, okay, thank you. Pre-season was lovely. This is where the serious business comes. Was this another indication of this person's character and how he's going to manage Liverpool and coach Liverpool? Like, you've done well. So that Klopp sentiment, because I think Klopp would have persisted with them. For example, this guy didn't.
But I think you can get carried away with that. There's games where, for instance, the start of the 21-22 season, Klopp's midfield was Keita, Oxlade-Chamberlain, and Milner. When he goes away to Norwich, because they were the players he felt were in nick. I think there's different ways of getting players into rhythm, and different managers do different things. It looks to me like Guardiola's.
But I agree with you. They were in nick. Robertson, McAllister weren't in good nick, whereas the players that he had for the preseason would have been in good nick.
But we don't. But we don't know the why. Is the why, for instance, this is just my first 11 and I'm whacking it on the pitch? Was the why I want to get these players to sharpness? And there's no other games. I can't pull a pre-season friendly in now. But I feel as though Ipswich away and maybe even Brentford at home is one where I can do a thing or two. I can still have a little look, and I've always got the cavalry to come off the bench if need be. I think you can make a case in both directions at once. It might be that he wants McAllister to be in his first 11 in general. That's the way he's going to look at it. But he knows he's going to have to suffer a little bit through these games. I think that both of those things are possible. I think the most important thing is, what does Curtis Jones, what does Harvey Elliott think? I'm not that bothered what Kostas Tsimikas thinks, but what does Curtis Jones and what does Harvey Elliott think? Because I think they're going to be really, really important when we're suddenly playing 3 games a week, and one of those games is away at Bayern Munich in the Swiss System Champions League, and we've got to get the best. We've got to get results in all 3 matches. And for me, as long as that squad harmony's there, as long as Curtis, I'm sure he wants to play football, but as long as Curtis is thinking to himself, "This fine, the manager's explained it to me, my time's going to come," then I'm quite relaxed about it. And, I think that's the key question here as you're going all the way through what it is that we think we're getting at this time and the why of it. So, and as I say, we don't have to be told why, I hasten to add. Like, he can, as long as he's honest with his squad and his squad understands the players and the squad understands, then I think that's all good. I think it is interesting that I think they were trying to do a little thing. They tried to do it against United, where when they were coming up against man-to-man against United in pre-season, Jones went the other side of the United press and left Gravenberch in on his own. And I think they were trying to do a thing where the idea is, hang on, if we get it that side, we'll have Szoboszlai arriving, but we'll be 4 or 5 on 4 if we pull this off. And I think that's what they were trying to do with McAllister. I just don't think, firstly, they executed it very well. And I don't think McAllister himself made himself particularly available in a way that would have helped, especially in that first half. And that's what I think they were trying to do. And as I say, Jones does a bit of it against Man United, where it's that idea of, if you want to press with 4 and then leave 2 sitting, that's absolutely fine, but we're going to put a spare man over here. And now Morsey shouldn't know where to stand. As it was, Liverpool didn't ask that question effectively until we get into the second half. And as I say, I just think that McAllister just, to me, looked a little bit blunted. I also like that Andy Robertson managed to look knackered after 3 minutes, and then just looked continually more knackered as it wore on, like a man just hanging in the bleep test. He was never out of the bleep test entirely, he kept just getting back in for the last bleep every single time. But then the 3 bleeps later, he was like, hang on, how am I back in this trouble? And I think that's, I think that's going to take a little bit of time to get used to there as well. And I think it's difficult to assess Robertson in general until that issue sort of addressed a little bit in there. And I think it is a little different on his side as well. But I was happy with it, in the round. I think with Gravenberch sitting deep, I think Lawrence is right to praise him in every single way. But I think it's also practically every holding midfielder, and I'll say this to anyone in the comments, practically every holding midfielder you like did not start as a holding midfielder. He was adapted and asked to play there at some point in his career. But I mean senior career, I don't mean at the age of 14. Rodri's actually on the more unique side. Vieira was moved into that position. Petit was moved into that position. Footballers get moved all the time. Fernandinho scores a goal for Liverpool in a cup final from right midfield.
But Neil, we don't even need to reference other teams' players and whatever.
No, Ronnie Whelan, Didier a man.
We can reference our own, and we don't even need to go to the Whelan era. We can go to the Klopp era, Chris. And one of the first few things that Klopp done was revamp players' positions and roles. Henderson, for example. Even Fabinho. Fabinho was a fullback at Monaco, played in a double pivot for Monaco, but then suddenly was instilled as a
just dead quick in the comments there. Toxic Tash, I think Liverpool should buy a midfielder. That is not me justifying why we're not. You call it a CDM. I think Liverpool should buy one midfielder. I think Liverpool should buy a defender, buy a midfielder, and buy an attacker. That's what I think. Just to be crystal clear.
We're going to get to that ranting and raving bit. That's going to be the best bit of the show. Guys,
I don't think it needs to be a holding midfielder. I think that they could buy a midfielder and either move him, or they could buy a midfielder, use other players in that position. They could buy an attacking midfielder, use Szoboszlai occasionally in that position. I think the important thing about Gravenberch to me is he looks like he's fully committed to the idea of playing that position for Liverpool, and that's what I loved the most about his performance on Saturday.
But Chris, is this a sign of...
Mustak can fuck off as well. Don't delete any.
Yeah. They can all fuck off if they want. There's 1,000. No, actually, don't all fuck off. Just the dickheads fuck off. There's over 1,000 of you guys. Can you hit the like button?
Wow.
The ratio is not ratioing type of thing.
This is the most people that's watched me in ages.
Please. This is a man who had 10,000 likes.
I want to hear the question to Chris. Chris is
exactly.
I'm dying to know the question. I can answer something else, though.
Can someone please moderate this bloody chat? I'm waiting for Chris to be asked this question.
I'm dying to ask this question.
I just want to see you ask it.
Pajak, Gravenberch.
Ask the question. I'm joking.
Gravenberch, is he the answer to our number 6? And was he impressive?
He was bloody impressive, I think, as Neil said, and as Lauren said and stuff. Whether he's the answer to play in the position of the deepest lying midfielder in Liverpool's new system, I don't know. No one can know after one game. He put in a brilliant performance, though, didn't he? I think, look, everybody knows, I think, here, that the idea is, and it is where I have to look back at Arsenal last season, right? Arsenal, in every fucking big game last season, played fucking Jorginho there and moved Declan Rice to the 8. In every single one. Why? Is it because Jorginho's a better defensive midfielder? No, it's because Arsenal want the football and they want a footballer to build out from the back. So even if we signed a better version of Endo, I don't think Arne Slot would play him in the bigger games against Manchester City and Arsenal when Liverpool are trying to dominate the football more than the other side. If you want to hang on against Manchester City and Arsenal, good grief, you've lost already. You might win 1 in 4, 1 in 5 against them. But if you want to win a league title, you're going to need to do more than that. You're going to need to take 4 points off them. You're going to need to dominate the football. So you need a midfielder who's going to dominate the football. Gravenberch did it brilliantly. The first time, and I've said this on Redburn, the first time I realised that Gravenberch could do it was when Trey and Yoni did it in the pre-season friendly. And I thought, oh, that's just Gravenberch, that, Wouldn't he look sick there? Yeah. Isn't that weird that the first time I knew that he could do it was when a kid did it? Because he kind of reminded me of him. But that's what he's good at. That's what we want to see. So for me, listen, Gravenberch could be the answer there. I don't know. But all I know is you don't need, I think Neil's right. I don't think you're going to need 15 to 20 games from a guy. I think you might just need 1 or 2 at times, and then you might find someone who is so perfectly suited to it that he's your answer. And until he's found that man, Gravenberch looks like it.
Yeah, I just think I think what we're talking about here, and with the way the season's going, it's interesting. Someone's mentioned Arsenal trying to buy Marino in the comments. It's because one of the things that you're going to need to get through this season's in being able to switch your bodies around and intensity. I'm going to say again, when people see the way the Champions League's going to work, they're going to be surprised and shocked, actually, and also how hard it's going to be to come top 8 in a 36-team group. You're going to play 8 Champions League games, and I think you're going to need to win 5 of them. I don't think you're going to do it with 4 wins and 3 draws. I think you're going to need to win 5 of them and get at least a draw. And I think 16 points will probably be enough to finish in the top 8. And if you nail that, then that's great. But to win 5, therefore, is you're going to have to either win your 4 homes and your away game against the pot 4 side, or more realistically, there's going to be a lot of pot 1 teams, because we're a pot 1 team. We're going to maybe exchange draws a little bit with each other. So then you're going to need to win 2 of your aways, 3 of your homes against 2, 3, and 4. And then hope that the 2 draws get you through. I think, but let's be clear about this. There's 9 pot 1 teams, and 9 does not go into 8. So there's at least 1 pot 1 team that will not be going through, and will have to play that playoff. And that playoff, by the way, we play at home and away in February. And after the second leg's our game away at Manchester City. Do you think Liverpool or Manchester City want to be playing that playoff? Absolutely no chance. No chance.
So this segues, Lawrence, into my next sort of phase of chat about squad depth and squad strength. So Neil was intimating that we need absolute optimum squad depth strength.
3 players.
Exactly. There you go. But Lawrence,
where are those 3? So I'm not disagreeing, but where?
No,
are
I think if I'm allowing for the idea here that Vandenberg looks as though he's going, I'd like him to. Yeah. I'd like him to go into the season with, and I don't think he will. By the way, I don't. And he only used 17 players for more than 900 minutes at Feyenoord in the league last season. I think he thinks he can run it with a smaller squad. I disagree with him, but he's the manager, and I think that this is partially him as well. I don't think this has anything to do with anything else. But anyway, I'd like to see him run it with 9 defenders, 7 midfielders, and 6 forwards, along with the 3 goalkeepers. So
if that's the case, Lawrence, today reports are suggesting Gomez and Sepp Vandenberg are on the verge of leaving. Just wanted to get your thoughts on Joe Gomez's career, because I think he absolutely deserves at least a minute or 2 for his services to Liverpool Football Club.
Yeah, I think Joe Gomez obviously was massively rated if you started watching Liverpool in the last couple of years, because I think there are games which feel more like outliers, which push his average or mean game score down. I was in Naples when we had the absolute disaster. I've been at a couple of the games where he's not had an ideal game, shall we say, and it's been such a harsh rubber band type reaction, and there's therefore such a judgment that it's skewed people's perception of him. And I actually think towards the middle to the end of last season, people started to change that again. But before that, they forget that he was a big part of the championship winning side, a big part of so much more that has been so good at Liverpool, and his ability. And I also think one big thing that, it's very easy to play FIFA or Football Manager, any of these things with all these players, and go, well, we'll buy a goalkeeper and he fits into the goalkeeper slot. And then I've got a left-sided centre-back who's got a left foot, and so he'll always kick it in that way. And then I've got this centre-back who'll do this thing. And that's definitely not the Slot style of management. And it began to not be the Pep Lingers and Klopp style of management. Whether that was effective or not is up to you. But I think a lot of people overlook character in the Liverpool team and how together that team is. And I know that's such an intangible for a group of people who don't sit in that room. But I think a big part of it for me was I looked at the injuries that he had. I looked at what he faced in that time. I look at the fact that he wasn't given first team football and was told you can sign a new contract here, but you will not be in that first team. And the kind of character, the kind of person that would take to accept that. A lot of people would obviously take the opposite side of that and go, well, he's willing to accept mediocrity, but those people are morons. So I think the main thing is true, but the main thing I would say about that is it shows someone who understands the bigger picture. And so I think Joe, throughout his Liverpool career, obviously being managed by a manager who's very good at seeing the bigger picture, has been not only selfless and sacrificed elements of his own game, but also shown he can add to that and is a very adaptable footballer. Hence why he's worth almost 50 million euros or 50 million euros, 45 million pounds, whatever you want to put on it. That's an expensive centre-back. And I think that's possibly why Liverpool are also being tempted, because Michael Edwards and everyone else down may be looking at that and saying, well, that's high value that we could then see if there's a value elsewhere in the market. Or do you know what I'm saying? I think there's a long-term vision here.
Chris, are you okay with Joe Gomez? I mean, Sepp Vandenberg, I think there's no question, there's no debate. We all agree, bought for, was it 5 million or something? And now being sold for 20 million circle on top. Fantastic. That is what, that's what buying young players is all about. Either you utilize them in the first team squad or you sell them for huge amounts of money. So Sepp Vandenberg, fine. Joe Gomez is a different case. He's been there 10 years. I find it difficult to let go of Joe Gomez for the reasons, Lawrence.
I'm not saying let go of him for that reason.
Just let him go.
It's really simple though for the guys at the football club. Is that I had a conversation with Ian Graham a few weeks ago around the launch of his book and stuff, and he literally put it to me like it was a sum, lads.
Exactly.
We value what they're going to give to this side, and if your bid is bigger than what we value it to buy out his contract over the course of however many years he's got left, then if you can tell me, a guy, and I love Joe Gomez, by the way, and I think he was absolutely sensational last season, but a guy who is our third choice right back, our third choice left back, and our fourth choice centre half. Has anyone ever got £45 million for that level of squad player before? I don't know whether they have or they haven't, but Liverpool will probably realise and go, that's really good. What Liverpool need to do with that money is go and buy someone who's more than a squad player, not replace Joe Gomez, the third choice right back and the third choice left back and the centre back. You're probably not going to be able to do that for 45 million quid, but go and buy someone that knocks someone else into a squad position. That's what Liverpool need to do with that money, because that's how you improve as a football team. You don't buy a squad player to sell a squad player to buy a squad player. You just go and get better players. That's what Liverpool need.
Unbelievable. Half an hour early. Never in the history of Uber Eats or Just Eat has deliveries arrived early. But on Football Carnage, just when we're in the middle of an amazing chat, his delivery has come early. But we'll excuse him because I'm known to eat on streams as well, so he can as well.
That's right.
Chris, sorry, because we didn't expect the delivery driver. Yeah, but so are we saying if Joe Gomez, and it looks very likely, and that he will be gone, are we targeting? Because the next question everyone's going to ask or want to know is, are we targeting a Virgil van Dijk successor, potential successor, or are we targeting another Joe Gomez who's a man of literally can play across the back four? And I'll come to you, Neil. What are you anticipating and expecting the people in charge to do then?
I think if Gomez goes, from what I've seen so far, there's two things I think he's going to need to be able to pick in every game, and one of those things is deep progressions from his back four.
Yeah,
and the other one of those things is pace in wide areas. And I think if he's got pace in wide areas and deep progressions from his back four, I think he can do everything. If you see what I mean, I think he thinks he can coach the rest and make the rest work. The only player he's got, I would argue, who's genuinely capable of all different forms of progressing the ball out of the back four is, out of the centre halves is Van Dijk. And I think he's going to want, therefore, a left-hand sided centre-back option or left-back option who can offer him that. So I think he probably lets Gomez go and looks at one of the sort of much vaunted left-sided centre-half, left-backy characters who are knocking around. Now, Inaccio's barely played a game of footy left-back in terms of starting position, but he ends up there a fair bit on the pitch. But also his forward passing from deep areas is absolutely phenomenal. And I think that the club will look at Inacio. I don't think they'll look at Gay, because I think you need to play Gay in a lot of games, and he doesn't look to me as though someone who can go and do bits at left back for you from time to time as well in game scenarios. And he doesn't have that versatility, because I don't think they can replace Van Dijk. Firstly, I don't think you can replace Van Dijk full stop. But also, I just don't think you can do it this season. I'd love Branthwaite. In the round, I'd love Branthwaite. Before you get into the difficulties of getting them out of Everton, even if that wasn't a thing. But if you're Branthwaite, I think you're well within your rights to say, so where do my 30 league starts come from? Left-hand side at centre-half. At which point you're going, well, the club captains, he might be on the wane and he might not sign a new deal, and we're not quite sure. People aren't idiots. Footballers aren't idiots. I don't think Liverpool can coherently offer that at this point in time. So I think you're in a situation where you need a player who might be able to occasionally play alongside Van Dijk, who'd understand that it's 6 months of getting into it a little bit as well, getting used to it, getting used to Premier League football, other bits and pieces. And I think Inacio makes a ton of sense. And I think they'll look to do either Hincapie or Inacio if they let Gomez go. And then from there, you're not that far away from. If we do look at our friends at Arsenal and Manchester City, Calafiore's gone to Arsenal. They've got Timber. These are lads who are both sort of full-backy, centre-backy options, but very much with the ball at the feet. You look at City, Ake, Gvardiol, Kyle Walker to an extent, John Stones. And I think that they'll be looking...
Ben White as well.
Ben White, yeah. I think Liverpool will feel as though in the round they could do with one of these. These other clubs have got more than one, but Liverpool might think we could just do with one. And we'll get dead hung up and start putting players into formations and picking teams and talking about first 11s and all of that. But I don't think it'll be like that for them. I think it'll be, for instance, Anacho might not start that many games centre-half in the first half of the season. It might be that because they're concerned about the aerial dominance. It might be that he'll only start him next to Canate because he's only 6'1" and he's a little bit light. And it might be that that's League Cup games or it's bottom 5 at home. He's popping up there and the rest in Virgil and all of that. But, I think the idea of getting a player in who's on a bit of a journey, who's the right age, on a little bit of a journey for 6 months at least, and then you're working out precisely how and when and where to use him, while still paying a lot of money for him. I think Anacho will probably come in at around 40 million quid. I think someone, and if it isn't that player, I'm just describing the profile that I think they're going to be looking at. And it's also a profile I think they should be looking at, whilst I simultaneously think it's really harsh on Gomez. But I think there's something else as well. I said before about 9 defenders, and that's what I want them to go with. But we're all very scarred by 2020, 2021 and the 22-23 season, in that we sort of in our heads, when we squad plan, we're like squad planning for effectively an apocalypse because we're used to there being apocalypses. And rightly or wrongly, and I think in the long run, I think he might actually prove to be a little bit wrong, because I don't think until you've lived the reality of a full English season, when you've realised it's so hard in January because you've just had to do December and all your players are crying and they're looking at you and they're in ribbons. I don't think he's lived one of these yet, the manager. But so I think he might not.
Jurgen started like that, Neil. He started with a squad of 17, 18 players that he wanted to work with. These are my boys from the start of the season till the end. Not at the end. He lived it and went, no, we need a bigger squad.
Yeah, so I'm quite, so it might be that, but we might have to go through that with him, because he might be saying that now and he might be saying something different in 18 months. But I'll say again, though, I want them to go with 9. And I think if they could get in Anacho full stop, I'd be into it. But then I think the flip side of that is if you do go with 9 defenders, 7 midfielders and 6 forwards, you're in a situation where 3 or 4 lads aren't making the trip when you go away to Ipswich. And I think it's hard I think footballers these days accept not being in the 11. I think they accept not necessarily getting used off the bench. I think it's hard to not be in the 20. I think that's hard for footballers.
Yeah. We're talking about sort of, planning and succession planning squad. We are on the verge. It's not all departures, Lawrence. We have news coming from the Tier 1 journalist today. Who's going to help me?
Who's in your Tier 1, Grizz? Who's in your Tier 1, mate?
Right
Pajak.
now, right now, it'd be...
Don't break news, just talk about it. It's different.
Right now, it'd be Indy Kylia at the absolute top. And then Ornstein.
I mean, that was a given. Why have you even said his name?
Well, sometimes people don't
understand.
There's
God tier, and then there's Tier 1, and then that's what you
and then there's Ornstein, and then there's Joyce. And I think we'd stop there. But Lawrence...
Has anyone else tried to work out who Ornstein's contact is? Because these stories used to be like somebody else at the Athletics or something. And all of a sudden, it went a little bit quiet around when Julian Ward left us or whatever. And then he started to get back onto the stories. And we're having a conversation about who was that contact? Who is his guy?
Someone said, a couple of people said on Twitter, people forgetting Liverpool, everything's going to be done behind the scenes and nothing's going to come out. I said, bollocks, is it? And then that's exactly how it's turned out to be. Everything's been played out in sort of social media, which is a bit disconcerting. But how do you say his name? Someone going to help me out here? Like Mama
Dashvili.
Mama Dashvili.
Right, well, we've all agreed then.
Neil says it's easy, but there was 3 different accents and different
Dashvili, come on.
Mama Dashvili.
I don't think that's unreasonable.
Okay, Mama Dashvili. I'll put my throw-pants in there as well. But Lawrence, succession planning. This is what we were known for. This was what we were supposed to bring back the nerds for. To get one of you described how we operate earlier. I can't remember, but sort of getting the player before he becomes the player.
Sure.
And this guy has the makings of being one of the most elite goalkeepers, Bayern Munich, Atletico Madrid, Man City, apparently all trying to get ahead of the game and get him. It looks like we have got ahead of the game and got him.
Let's not count our chickens, Grizz. We've been here before, mate.
Before,
a few times.
Yeah.
Never.
All right. But let's just say potentially. How did it make you feel about Alisson straight away? Because apparently it's just a 1-year loan. He's going to go back to Valencia on loan, but it's going to be. Did it make you feel in any way, shape, or form about Alisson straight away? Because this is the least. I think it's fair to say this was the least or the last position we thought of succession planning, especially with Kelleher already in amongst the ranks.
Yeah, I'm very emotionally attached to Alisson, obviously, because of what he's done for Liverpool. I've always thought of him as extremely valuable, I guess, not only to the squad, but also in terms of behind-the-scenes leadership. I think he had a very close relationship with Klopp, and it was always clear, I think, that he, I don't think it was any secret that Klopp loves a religious guy. And I always tried to work out exactly why. Obviously, we can all speculate, but I think, because we've all met him, we've all been around him a little bit. He's a very down-to-earth guy, extremely intelligent person, speaks a lot of languages, all these kind of things. He ticks all those boxes. I guess for me, I'm trying to find a way of putting it politically. I don't think he was a Klopp acolyte, and therefore, if it's not Klopp, it's nobody. But I do wonder if there are some players who are thinking, well, maybe I have come towards the end of my journey in Liverpool, or maybe it might also be the complete opposite of that. And he might be perfectly happy in Liverpool. And the evaluation of him might be, well, actually, you don't do what we want you to do as a goalkeeper, obviously apart from make some incredible saves, for a slot team. Not only that, it might be neither of those things, because, by the way, he fulfills so many things as a goalkeeper and is the best goalkeeper in the world. And the third option is that it could just be that goalkeepers are extremely rare commodities, and if you can get them for a really great price, then you know that if you do have them on your books, then whether your goalkeeper chooses to leave and you replace him with this new goalkeeper who ticks all the boxes in the same way, or you choose to sell him to another club for an extremely high price because they're a rare commodity, then that also works. Knowing what's going on behind the scenes at Liverpool, like you've already said, is virtually impossible because, as Chris said, there was the Ian Doyle comments and those kind of things, but we've known that for a long time. But then my fourth theory is that Liverpool just love bearded men.
Brilliant setup.
Yeah.
Brilliant setup.
I mean, he fits. Go on. Yeah.
They're all strong theories, and it's one of the reasons for Grizz's ongoing popularity. There is
one of.
I think that Liverpool rate this fella clearly. I don't think it's complicated. I don't think you have to necessarily read too much into it. They may or may not think that Alisson might move on. He's got 3 years left, is what I would say around Alisson. And they may well just sort of be of the view, we can get this guy now. This is how much it'd be. He wants to come and be part of what we're about, or have the option of that in the fullness of time. I'm quite, I think to me, it's exactly the sort of future planning that it's easy to say you want Liverpool to do in other areas of the pitch. The one thing I would say is it's much easier to do this sort of thing in goal than it is anywhere else, in that being a goalkeeper is just different. They train predominantly with their own crew in their own way. They're not part of a lot of team building. You want to get your outfield players playing the way you want them to play. I think there is stylistic things around goalkeepers, don't get me wrong, but it's not, it doesn't have to be markedly massively different. So I think that they can do this and they're choosing to. I think I don't want to read too much into it, in part because it'd be a bit sad, but also I think if there's something to be said on Alisson at any stage, the one thing I would like to see happen is it's said at the right moment in the fullness of time. So there can be the moment at Anfield, for instance, where you get to see him off. And it wouldn't surprise me if you are Alisson Becker, if you want that, and that's not an ego thing. I think it's that idea of feeling the completeness. We know what football clubs mean to footballers, especially when it all goes well. So I'm of the view that as and when there is something happening with Alisson, we will actually just know it in the fullness of time. And then there will be, in the same way we did for Firmino, in the same way that in the same way we obviously did for Klopp, in the same way we even did for Divock Origi. I think that, what this does is it means that Liverpool can do all of that with a certain level of surety. even if that doesn't mean anything ever has to happen, if you know what I mean. It could be that Alisson signs another contract, play for Liverpool till he's 42, like Dino's off, and we flog this lad in the near future. I'd rather be in that universe, and I think I'll say again, I think it is possible to be in that universe where goalkeepers are concerned, whereas I think it's a lot harder to be in that universe where centre forwards are concerned, for instance.
Chris,
I agree with a lot of what the lads have already said already, to be honest. But I think for me, I just don't think Liverpool want to be in the habit of having to spend 70, 80, 90, 100 million pounds on a goalkeeper. And yet they are also the most easy to sort of recognise the point difference that they give you. So you can spend 100 million pounds on a goalkeeper and there might be a 15-point swing in your season. It's very much worth spending 100 million pound if the goalkeeper's good enough, or 70 million if it's Alisson, if the goalkeeper is good enough. It's quite easy to value a goalkeeper. What this reminds me of is Thibaut Courtois going to Chelsea in 2011, where he went to Atletico Madrid for 3 years. Proved it over there in a league much better. To be honest, I love Quentin Kelleher, right? But wouldn't you rather your next goalkeeper, be getting first team experience at a big football club in a big league? Like, isn't that actually a much better way of doing things than we're going to get this lad in and sit behind Alisson for 4 years, not playing football until he's injured, which he's done exceptionally well, by the way, I will say. But isn't it just a better way of doing it? And look at what Thibaut Courtois did. He won stuff at Atletico Madrid. He goes back to Chelsea, wins a Premier League, goes on to Real Madrid, wins all kinds of stuff. So isn't that a better way to just develop a goalkeeper? And it goes back to Neil. He's not part of the squad. Doesn't need to be in the bloody Rondo training the goalkeeper, does he? It's just you need experience to be a goalkeeper. So spending 35 million quid on a fella who looks like he's having his breakout year, just like last season, like Alisson at Roma did. You know, he saved the team, I think it was 7.4 in terms of post-shot expected goals. I think Georgie's just done 10 point something last season. It could be way above the norm. It's likely to regress.
Call him that? Is that what you're going to go after saying that his name's so easy to pronounce? Are you really going to shorten it to Georgie?
Georgie, welcome to
When I'm talking quickly, I don't need to think about it. Mamadashvili has just had a breakout season there with like 10.4 post-shot expected goals against. He saved inside that. He could regress whatever, but you know, does it not just make sense to buy a goalkeeper, get him going playing football, and think about it? I'd love Liverpool to have done this with Salah and Virgil, and
I was going to say
everything else. By the way, that we should be focusing on the fact that they didn't do it or haven't done it yet with somebody else, not the fact that we are doing it now. Because for a year, all I've heard is, why have they done this? Why haven't they done that?
But this is my final segment.
What we want. Don't make it a bad thing.
This is my final segment because I'm very aware Neil's foods arrived 20 minutes early.
It's all right now. It's fine. Well, I mean, we're all with the punches at this stage. Don't be worried.
But this is the final segment in terms of, we've spoken about Virgil's succession planning. We've spoken about Alisson, and I believe the third person out of the legendary Klopp team squad is, of course, Mohamed Salah. How on earth do we look to replace him? And Neil, is there any suggestions how you would go about replacing him? Of course,
time machine.
Replace him for like, but how do we do it? Neil, how do we replace Salah? Because we have to think about it now.
I think we do, but I'm intrigued to see what happens next with Salah going into next season. I think I'm of the view that the club should sign Anthony Gordon in this window. I think that feels like it's something that could happen. It doesn't feel beyond the realms of possibility. There'll be a bit of pushback from Newcastle, but I think there's ways and means. And I also think it would suit Newcastle to be able to blame the previous regime, which the new sporting director can do. It's a mad deal in the end that they end up putting Gordon on, only a 3.5-year contract, which means there's only 2 years left, and they need to, for their own PSR purposes, do something about it. I think, therefore, then Liverpool go into the season with 6. And then come next summer, in the run-up to next summer, you've got a bit of a decision to make in terms of what you're going to do with Salah's contract. Salah's got a decision to make himself about what he wants from his own contract. And you're likely to also have a little bit of a decision to make around Diaz. Because Diaz will only have 2 years left, and he's on reportedly quite a low wage in comparison
80,
to...
is it, I think, is it?
Well, it's even 55 I've seen put about. So I think, there's some sort of point to where there's a decision to be made there around Diaz. But part of the reason to run with 6 is it means that you've always got one spare, if you see what I mean. Now, let's be clear about this again, you're not necessarily going to replace Mo Salah with someone as good as Mo Salah, because I would argue he's been the second best and could be the best, but the second best attacker or joint first best attacker along with Thierry Henry in the Premier League era.
Fair.
And that's perfectly reasonable. And it's fair to say that Arsenal, whilst breaking 80 points in the last 2 seasons, have yet to successfully replace Thierry Henry. Because guess what? Brilliant players are remarkably difficult to replace. But you do it in the round, you do it in the aggregate, you do it with everything else that you've got going in attack. And it might be that Liverpool's attack, therefore, becomes a little bit more conventional. I know, Lawrence and Chris both do really good work in different ways around the tactic stuff. It was noticeable to me, for instance, that when I went through StatsBomb's numbers, Salah only put in 3 pressures against Ipswich, 3, which might as well be 0. The other 5 of the front 6 all put in the other side of 15, which suggests to me that there's a framework there in place to ensure that Salah can do his best work when we've got the ball with his intensity in his sprint, which, by the way, I'm all in favour of. This isn't me having a go at Salah, and I'm certainly not calling him lazy. But what it says to me, though, is that Liverpool are already making the manager is making adaptations in the same way that his Feyenoord side Timber didn't press as much as other players in there as well. Certain players had a bit of a pass, others were the ones who were responsible for the intensity. So again, it's not me having a go. It's a really firm decision. But my point is,
it's a normal thing as well with all the players, Neil, isn't it?
That's
also the thing.
You take the responsibility of them and you share it all around a little bit more, but also because you want him to be able to be at his quickest and at his best when we get the ball, because that's where he's going to have the biggest value for us. But my point is that Liverpool might end up therefore in the medium term when Salah does move on, and I hope he does sign an extension, but with a more conventional sort of layout in terms of who's doing what and all of that sort of stuff. So I'm quite, you're not going to replace you're not going to go and buy Mo Salah 2, and that's absolutely fine. But there's other teams who are capable of scoring 85, 90 goals a season across Europe who don't have Mo Salah. So I think it's worth just sort of saying that you'll get there on that as long as you're recruiting well and recruiting smartly in the fullness of time. And as I say, I'd buy Anthony Gordon in this window.
Lawrence,
I agree about Anthony Gordon. I think Anthony Gordon would be a great buy. I also think it's worth.
I'll let the cutest chat as well, Lawrence. There, go on.
I guess there are 2 points for me to add to that because I agree with everything those two have said. First of all, you're never going to sign the new Mo Salah when you have Mo Salah, because the new Mo Salah is not going to want to play behind Mo Salah. Secondly, when we signed Mo Salah, he wasn't Mo Salah. The quote from Mina Rizuki was, and I'm not throwing Mina Rizuki under the bus here, I think she's a great journalist, but the quote from Mina Rizuki is she didn't think he'd get over 10 goals this season, I think. I think he did relatively well in dispelling that myth, but outside of that, I think...
One season wonder was also added.
And that was almost all the coverage, in the same way as they never acknowledged the relationship that Firmino had with Salah and how he made Salah better and how Salah's game has changed since Firmino left and how good Mane was, all these kind of things, because there was so much about Liverpool's ethos which played into what made Mo Salah so good. And it's not only the club, but it was also what Jurgen Klopp wanted from that specific winger. And so when someone said, well, Saudi have got 150 million to spend on him, I didn't say out of hand, no, I would reject that money. Obviously, there are plenty of reasons why I wouldn't want him to go to Saudi. But my main point was maybe in the same way as we've spoken about the aggregate, Salah also benefits from the aggregate at Liverpool, as Neil's laid out. And as we see Chris excellently lay out every week on Redmen. So I think that's the other point here is, again, it's not FIFA. It's not that we need to sign Ronaldo or Messi or whoever it is that we need to sign someone who's good for the system and is going to get the goals. And if it's someone who's a better winger and better at serving Jota, Nunez, Gordon, whoever it is, brilliant. I think that's just as good as signing the new Mo Salah.
People, I think it's time to call it, because I promised these guys an hour and I've gone just over. So I must stick to my promise. Otherwise,
Neil, what did you get though? What did you get? I mean, that's what everyone's dying to know.
Yeah,
what was it half an hour ago?
Just Haribo in a bag.
I went to Parampara,
right,
and I got. I've actually sort of half forgotten now.
Are we playing this game now where I have to now say what I got and then Chris says what he got? And
I got the onion bargies because they're outrageous. They're onion bargies, and I got myself a little chicken speciality that they do. And they do a really good mixed starter with an appetizer. And I've just realised I forgot to order the fucking rice.
I was just going to say, I can't. What are you going to eat all that with? And then you just explained to yourself.
I can't believe. I've just looked at my list. I've forgotten. I forgot to
absolute
order
amateur.
Oh,
They do the
We'd have
best.
just
They
asked
do
you
the
when you got
best
back. You
fucking
could have been
rice,
here by now.
I know, but I was doing it whilst I was on this.
And
so
I
was
bet you got robbed.
by your company.
I bet you got robbed as well. I bet you the prices are ludicrous. I bet you any money.
No, got all that for
No, reasonable?
$17.95.
That's
If I tell
I
my
think
wife,
their
17
Fuking rice
if I
is
tell my
incredible, by
wife
the way,
right now,
guys.
I'm going to tell my wife what you've just about to eat for $17.95. She's going to invite you around and say, look, tell him for a $5, we'll look after him every night. Do you know what I mean? Like
Wow.
that is $17.95 for about, anyway.
Grizz, I'd have to get to yours. I'd have to get
Yeah,
to yours.
you have to. You have to.
You know what I mean?
It's a long
Guys, this has been...
Also for all the conversation as to who should replace Mo Salah, if we look on the wall behind Grizz, he's got 99 for his FIFA ratings, and Mo Salah's not got that. So maybe the answer is just Grizz, and also he's got the beard that Lawrence looking for.
The thing, we do all have Photoshop though, so we could all do the same as Grizz and make ourselves 99 on FIFA. Yeah.
There you go. What a way to end. What a way to end. Slander the host. But listen, this has been amazing. I've really enjoyed this chat. My cup of tea went down a treat. Neil's food's going to go down a treat. Lawrence has to find a home.
You made a big deal of it being a mocha before.
It wasn't mocha. It wasn't mocha. I can prove it by the. Anyway.
Wow.
But it's been wonderful. People, over 1,200 of you guys still in here. I haven't checked the likes, but surely they're 500 plus. But anyway, Neil, Chris, Lawrence, thank you so much. It's been amazing. We may, if I'm lucky, and you guys are lucky in the chat, we may do this again at some point in mid-season.
Really enjoyed it, mate. Yes, absolutely.
Really, really enjoyable.
These are the best two in the game.
Oh,
3, but 2 guests.
Without a shadow of a doubt. Absolutely without a shadow of a doubt. I'm going to try to find the right intro. If it don't, then whatever, innit? You've enjoyed the chat, and that was the main thing. Over and out. Take care.